In the glittering heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers pierce the sky like diamonds on a velvet backdrop, Alexander Harrington reigned supreme. As the CEO of Harrington Global, a tech empire valued at billions, his days were a symphony of private jets, boardroom conquests, and evenings spent in penthouses overlooking Central Park. But fate, that capricious architect of destinies, has a way of derailing even the most meticulously planned lives. One crisp autumn morning, when a chauffeured limousine sputtered to a halt amid a freak traffic snarl caused by a burst water main, Alexander found himself staring at a humble city bus pulling up nearby. With a crucial investor meeting looming and no time to waste, he did the unthinkable. He boarded it. The bus was a world unto itself, a microcosm of humanity crammed into a rattling metal box. The air hummed with the chatter of strangers, a weary nurse scrolling through her phone, a street artist sketching furiously on a napkin, and an elderly man clutching a worn leather briefcase. Alexander, in his tailored Armani suit and Rolex glinting under the fluorescent lights, felt like an intruder in this realm of the ordinary. He squeezed into a seat by the window, his mind racing with calculations of lost time and potential deals slipping away. Little did he know, this ride would shatter his carefully constructed facade and ignite a transformation that would redefine everything he thought he knew about success, empathy, and the true value of a life well lived. As the bus lurched forward through the congested streets, Alexander's phone buzzed incessantly with emails from his executive team. He fired off terse replies, oblivious to the woman sitting across from him, a middle-aged librarian named Elena, her eyes tired but kind, carrying a stack of dog-eared books. She noticed his furrowed brow and, with a gentle smile, offered him a peppermint from her purse. "Rough morning?" she asked, her voice cutting through the din like a warm breeze. Alexander hesitated, and used to such unsolicited kindness from someone who wasn't on his payroll. "You could say that," he muttered, accepting the candy more out of politeness than need. But Elena wasn't one to stop at small talk. She had a story of her own, one that began with a dream deferred and a life rebuilt from the ashes of corporate burnout. Elena spoke of her days as a high-powered editor in publishing, climbing the ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. "I had the corner office, the expense account, the whole package," she said, her words weaving through the bus's rhythmic jolts. "But one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Exhausted, isolated, chasing numbers that never filled the void." Alexander listened, at first dismissively, but something in her tone resonated. He thought of his own sleepless nights, the hollow victories, the family he'd neglected in pursuit of the next acquisition. As the bus stopped at a red light, a young boy boarded with his mother, his eyes wide with wonder at the city unfolding outside. The child pointed to a mural on a passing wall, exclaiming about its colors, and Elena chuckled. "Kids see the magic we forget," she remarked. Intrigued despite himself, Alexander found himself opening up, a rarity for a man who guarded his vulnerabilities like state secrets. He shared snippets of his world, the pressure of leading thousands, the thrill of innovation, the loneliness at the top. Elena nodded knowingly. Wealth buys comfort, but connection? That's earned in moments like this. The bus turned onto a quieter avenue, and as they passed a community garden bursting with late-blooming flowers, she invited him to think about what truly mattered. But just then, the bus hit a pothole, jostling everyone, and Alexander's briefcase tumbled open, spilling confidential documents onto the floor. Among them was a proposal for a new app that promised to revolutionize urban living. But at what cost? Elena bent down to help gather the papers, her eyes catching a key phrase about displacing low-income neighborhoods for smart city developments. "Is this progress?" she asked softly, handing them back. "Or just another way to widen the gap?" Alexander felt a pang he couldn't ignore, a crack in his armor widening with each block the bus traveled. The conversation deepened, touching on dreams unfulfilled and the human cost of ambition. Outside, the city blurred by, vendors hawking hot pretzels, joggers weaving through parks, lives intersecting in ways he'd never paused to consider. As they approached his stop near the financial district, Elena pulled out a small notebook and jotted something down. "Here's an address," she said, tearing off the page. "A place where people like us rediscover what we've lost. No suits required." He took it, puzzled, as the bus doors hissed open. Stepping off into the familiar chaos of Wall Street, Alexander glanced back, but the bus was already pulling away, carrying Elena and the others into the flow of the day. Little did he know, that slip of paper would lead him to a hidden community center in Brooklyn, where volunteers built not empires, but bridges between worlds, and where his real journey was about to begin. That evening, back in his opulent office, Alexander couldn't shake the encounter. The investor meeting had gone flawlessly, securing another multimillion-dollar deal, but the victory tasted oddly flat. He stared at the address in his hand, 47 Willow Street, a nondescript building that Google Maps revealed as a hub for social initiatives. Curiosity gnawed at him, overriding his schedule. The next morning, instead of his usual routine, he called his driver and directed him to Brooklyn, a borough he'd only visited for high-end real estate scouts. Arriving at the center, he was greeted by a cacophony of laughter and activity. Kids in after-school programs, seniors sharing stories, and workshops on everything from coding to gardening. Elena was there, volunteering as a mentor, and her surprise quickly turned to a welcoming grin. "Didn't expect to see you so soon," she teased. As he wandered the halls, Alexander met Marcus, a former tech whiz who'd left Silicon Valley after a breakdown, now teaching coding to underprivileged youth. "It's not about the code," Marcus explained over coffee in the communal kitchen. "It's about giving them tools to change their own narratives." Alexander watched as a group of teens debugged a simple app, their enthusiasm infectious. For the first time in years, he felt a spark, not from profit margins, but from potential unleashed. Elena pulled him into a session on ethical business practices, where participants debated the impact of corporate decisions on communities. "Your app," she said pointedly during a break, "could displace families. But what if it empowered them instead?" The idea took root like a seed in fertile soil. Over the following weeks, Alexander returned to the center in secret, shedding his CEO persona layer by layer. He mentored a young inventor named Mia, whose prototype for affordable smart homes mirrored his company's tech, but with a human-centered twist. Through her, he saw the flaws in his own empire, the relentless drive that trampled lives in the name of innovation. One rainy afternoon, as they tinkered in the workshop, Mia confessed her family's struggle with eviction due to rising rents fueled by developments like his. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, forcing Alexander to confront the collateral damage of his success. Word of his visits leaked, and soon his board grew restless, questioning his distractions. But Alexander was changing, his priorities shifting like tectonic plates. He began integrating ideas from the center into Harrington Global, piloting programs for community tech hubs, revising projects to prioritize sustainability over speed. Yet challenges mounted. A rival firm sensed weakness and launched a takeover bid, while personal doubts crept in. Was this transformation genuine, or just a fleeting guilt trip? As tensions peaked, Alexander received an urgent call from Elena. The center was facing closure due to funding cuts from a city redevelopment plan. Ironically, one influenced by his industry peers. Determined to act, Alexander rallied his resources, but not in the way he'd always done. Instead of throwing money at the problem, he organized a grassroots campaign, leveraging his network to amplify voices from the center. Media buzzed with the story of the billionaire turning advocate, but not everyone was convinced. During a heated town hall meeting, a skeptical resident challenged him. "Why now? What's in it for you?" Alexander paused, the room hanging on his words, and for the first time, he spoke from the heart about that bus ride, about Elena's peppermint and Mia's dreams, about rediscovering purpose beyond the bottom line. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others still wary, but a seed of trust was planted. As the campaign gained momentum, Alexander faced a pivotal board meeting where his position hung in the balance. Walking into the room, He carried not just spreadsheets, but stories of lives touched, communities strengthened. Profit without purpose is empty, he declared, unveiling a bold new vision for the company. Tech for the people, not just the elite. The board was divided, whispers of ouster in the air, when suddenly his phone lit up with a message from Mia, a video of the center's kids holding signs of support. It was the push he needed. In the days that followed, alliances formed in unexpected places. A former competitor, moved by the publicity, offered partnership instead of rivalry. The city council, under public pressure, reconsidered the funding cuts. Alexander's life, once a solitary ascent, now intertwined with a web of connections that enriched him far more than any fortune. But as victory seemed within reach, a shadowy figure from his past emerged, a disgruntled ex-partner with dirt that could unravel everything. Late one night, as Alexander pored over plans at the center, a knock echoed at the door, revealing a man with a manila envelope and a smirk. "You think you can just change the game?" he sneered, sliding the contents across the table. Evidence of old dealings that skirted ethics, threatening to expose Alexander's transformation as a facade. Alexander's pulse hammered in his throat as he stared at the envelope. The man across the table was Victor Lang, once his closest ally in the early days of Harrington Global, a co-founder who had been quietly bought out years ago after a bitter falling out. Victor's eyes gleamed with the cold satisfaction of long-nurtured resentment. The documents inside detailed offshore accounts, backdated contracts, and quiet payoffs to city officials that had greased the wheels for several of Alexander's most profitable developments. Deals that, in the harsh light of today, looked less like shrewd business and more like moral compromise. "You've been playing saint lately," Victor said, voice low and venomous, parading around community centers, preaching ethics on podcasts. "But these?" He tapped the envelope. "These will remind the world who you really are. One leak to the right journalist, and your little redemption arc collapses. The board boots you, the stock tanks, and that precious center of yours? It gets bulldozed faster than you can say corporate responsibility." Alexander felt the room tilt. Every late-night rationalization, every justification he'd whispered to himself during those ruthless years, rushed back like a flood. He had always told himself it was the cost of building something great, that the ends justified the means. But now, with Mia's hopeful face in his mind and Elena's quiet faith in his change, the excuses curdled. "How much?" Alexander asked, the question automatic, the old CEO reflex kicking in. Victor laughed, a sharp bark that echoed off the empty workshop walls. "You think this is about money now? I'm worth more than you paid me to disappear." "No, Alexander. I won't watch you choose. Confess publicly, step down, hand the company to someone who won't pretend to be Mother Teresa, or I release everything. You have until the gala next Friday. Blackmail suits you, by the way. Brings out the real you." Victor stood, smoothed his coat, and left without another word, the door clicking shut like a judge's gavel. Alexander sat frozen long after, the envelope untouched between his hands. Rain lashed the windows, turning the city lights into smeared halos. For the first time in decades, he felt utterly alone. Not the solitary king atop his empire, but a man stripped bare, confronted by the architecture of his own past. Sleep evaded him that night. In the penthouse that once felt like a throne room, he paced until dawn, memories assaulting him in waves. The late nights with Victor plotting their first big takeover, the champagne toasts after outmaneuvering rivals, the quiet dismissals of employees deemed redundant. He opened his laptop and scrolled through old emails, each one a breadcrumb leading back to choices he could no longer defend. By morning, his reflection in the mirror looked haggard, eyes ringed with the weight of reckoning. He drove himself to the community center, arriving just as volunteers were setting up for the weekend coding camp. Elena spotted him immediately. Her smile faltered at his expression. She led him to the small office at the back, closed the door, and waited. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked as he laid it all out. Victor, the documents, the ticking clock. Elena listened without interruption, her face unreadable until he finished. So the man who stepped off that bus with me, she said softly, is still wrestling with the man who boarded it. Alexander nodded, throat tight. I thought I could outrun him, rewrite the story. But maybe people like me don't get redemption. Maybe we just get exposed. Elena leaned forward, eyes fierce. Or maybe redemption isn't a costume you put on for the cameras. Maybe it's choosing to do the hard thing, even when no one will applaud it. She paused, then added, you could pay him off again, bury it deeper. Plenty of CEOs would. Or you could face it, tell the truth yourself, on your terms, and let the chips fall. The idea terrified him more than ruin. Confess publicly? Hand over the narrative to a ravenous press? Yet something in her steady gaze anchored him. That afternoon, he sat with Marcus and Mia in the workshop, watching them refine an open-source housing app that could monitor energy use in low-income buildings and suggest grants for upgrades. Their excitement was pure, untainted by boardroom games. When Mia asked why he looked so distracted, he almost told her everything, but instead he simply said, grown-up problems. But seeing you two work makes them feel smaller. Over the next days, Alexander moved like a ghost through his own life. Board meetings blurred. He delegated ruthlessly, buying time. He met quietly with his legal team, not to craft denials, but to understand exactly how deep the liability ran. The news wasn't good. Statute of limitations had expired on some. But reputational damage would be catastrophic, and a few lingering regulatory gray areas could invite fresh investigations. He returned to the center each evening, helping where he could, seeking solace in routine tasks, stacking chairs after story hour, serving coffee to night class students, listening to seniors recount lives rich with struggle and joy. One night, an elderly veteran named Mr. Reyes pulled him aside. You carry something heavy, son, the old man said, eyes sharp despite his years. Whatever it is, don't let it steal the good you're doing now. Past is a classroom, not a prison. Those words lingered. Alexander began drafting a statement, not a polished PR deflection, but a raw accounting. He wrote and deleted, wrote again, each version peeling back another layer of defensiveness. He invited Elena to read the latest draft over tea in the center's kitchen. She read in silence, then looked up, tears glistening. This is brave, she whispered, but it will cost you everything you spent your life building. Maybe, he replied, voice steady for the first time in days, but it might give me something I never had. The gala loomed, a glittering annual event where Harrington Global unveiled its philanthropic commitments to an audience of donors, politicians, and press. Victor would be there, watching, waiting for capitulation. Alexander's team had prepared the usual spectacle. Soaring videos of global impact, celebrity endorsements, a 7-figure check presentation. But as the day approached, Alexander made quiet changes. He swapped the slick montage for raw footage from the Brooklyn Center. Kids coding, seniors learning tablets, families attending financial literacy workshops. He cut the celebrity host, choosing instead to speak himself. The night arrived in a flurry of limousines and flashing bulbs. Alexander stepped onto the red carpet in a simple dark suit. No flashy watch, no practice smile. Reporters shouted questions about rumors of board unrest. He offered only, thank you for coming. I have something important to share inside. The ballroom sparkled with crystal and ambition. Victor stood near the bar, drink in hand, eyes narrowed as Alexander took the stage alone. The room hushed. Alexander gripped the podium, heart thundering, and began not with triumph, but with contrition. 10 years ago, he said, voice carrying through the speakers, I made choices that prioritized profit over people. I justified corners cut, communities overlooked, influence quietly purchased. I told myself it was necessary to build something great. But greatness built on harm is just another word for greed. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Phones rose to record. Victor's face hardened. Alexander continued, detailing specific deals, naming the envelope's contents without theatrics, owning every decision. I could have buried this again. I was tempted to, but the people who taught me better deserve more than evasion. He spoke of the bus ride, of Elena's peppermint, of Mia's invention and Mr. Reyes' wisdom. I stand here not asking for forgiveness, but offering accountability. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO. The company I founded will move forward under new leadership committed to ethical innovation. Profits from my remaining shares will seed a foundation dedicated to the kind of community-driven work happening right now in neighborhoods we once ignored. The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, a few scattered applause breaking through. Victor shoved toward the exit, face purple with rage, but security, alerted privately, escorted him out before he could cause a scene. Cameras flashed relentlessly. On the balcony overlooking the city, Elena waited where he'd asked her to. She didn't speak, just took his hand as they watched the news alerts explode across screens below. Harrington CEO resigns amid scandal confession. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was brutal and swift. Stock plunged, lawsuits emerged, tabloids feasted. Yet something unexpected bloomed alongside the wreckage. Messages poured in, not just condemnation, but gratitude from former employees who'd felt silenced, from activists who'd fought his developments, from strangers inspired to examine their own compromises. The foundation he'd seeded drew donations from unlikely sources: rival firms, small investors, even anonymous gifts from center families. Alexander moved into a modest Brooklyn brownstone, walking distance from Willow Street. Mornings found him at the center, no longer the benefactor dropping checks, but the volunteer fixing glitchy computers and mentoring alongside Marcus. Mia's app launched open source, adopted by housing nonprofits nationwide. Elena became the foundation's director, her steady hand guiding its growth. One spring evening, as cherry blossoms drifted over the community garden they'd fought to preserve, Alexander and Elena sat on a bench watching kids chase fireflies. He turned to her, the weight of the past lighter now, though never gone. "That bus ride," he said quietly, "I thought it derailed my life. Turns out it put me on the right track at last." She smiled, squeezing his hand. But tracks, like lives, have unexpected turns. A letter arrived the next day, postmarked from overseas, bearing a handwriting Alexander hadn't seen in years. His estranged sister, reaching out after seeing his confession, wondering if the brother she'd lost to ambition might finally be ready to come home for their mother's milestone birthday. And tucked in the local paper was a small article. City Council approving a new affordable tech hub, with Harrington Foundation as lead partner, breaking ground on the very site Victor once schemed to claim. As summer approached, opportunities and challenges intertwined. A prestigious university invited Alexander to teach a course on ethical leadership. Ironic, he thought, yet tempting. Meanwhile, whispers reached him of old associates forming a coalition to challenge the foundation's influence, unwilling to let his pivot reshape the industry unchecked. Late one night, reviewing grant proposals under the soft glow of his desk lamp, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Harrington," a young voice said. "You don't know me, but I was on that bus the day you met Elena. I've been following your story. I'm about to inherit my family's company, and I could use some advice from someone who's learned the hard way." Alexander leaned back, a slow smile spreading. The journey, it seemed, was only beginning. Threads from that single ride weaving outward, touching lives he'd never imagined, pulling him toward horizons still unfolding. Alexander hung up the phone, the young heir's voice still echoing in his ear, a tentative plea laced with the same hunger he once knew too well. He set the device down on the scarred wooden table that had become his desk, surrounded by stacks of grant applications and children's thank you drawings taped to the wall. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with evening life. Families strolling under strings of holiday lights, vendors calling out last orders, laughter spilling from open windows. It was a far cry from the sterile silence of his old penthouse, yet it felt more like home than any marble fortress ever had. Months blurred into a rhythm he never expected to cherish. Mornings began with coffee brewed in the center's ancient percolator, shared with volunteers who now called him Alex without hesitation. He taught workshops on turning ideas into reality, not through venture capital decks, but through grit, collaboration, and heart. Mia's app had evolved into a nationwide platform, saving families thousands in utility costs and earning her a full scholarship to MIT. She visited often, her once shy demeanor replaced by the confident glow of someone who knew her worth. "You believed when no one else did," she told him one afternoon, hugging him tightly before boarding her train. "Now it's my turn to pay it forward." Elena and Alex grew closer in the quiet spaces between crises. No grand gestures, no tabloid romance, just shared glances over chaotic dinners, hands brushing while planting spring bulbs in the garden, late-night talks on the brownstone stoop as the city settled. One golden September evening, as sunlight slanted through the leaves, he took her hand and asked her to build the rest of this unpredictable life with him. She answered not with words, but with a kiss that tasted of possibility and second chances. The foundation flourished beyond anyone's dreams. What began as seed money from his shares blossomed into a movement. Corporations once rivals now partnered, redirecting profits toward community tech hubs sprouting in cities across the country. Former critics became allies. Politicians who once courted his donations now sought his counsel on ethical development. The Brooklyn Center expanded, new wings for art therapy, makerspaces, rooftop gardens where seniors taught urban farming to wide-eyed kids. Every brick laid felt like atonement made tangible. Yet shadows lingered. Not every story wrapped neatly. Some lawsuits dragged on. Old wounds reopened when journalists dug deeper. A few nights, doubt crept in, whispering that one man's change couldn't balance decades of harm. But then a letter would arrive, from a family kept in their home because of Mia's app, from a coder who landed their first job through the center's program, from the young heir now steering his conglomerate toward fair labor practices. Each one a reminder that ripples could become waves. Winter returned, blanketing the city in pristine snow. On the anniversary of that fateful bus ride, Alex stood at the center's entrance watching children build snow sculptures under floodlights. Elena joined him, wrapping a scarf around his neck. "Remember when you stepped off that bus looking like you'd entered another planet?" she teased. He laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. "I had, and I never wanted to leave it." Inside, the annual holiday gathering was in full swing. Tables groaning with potluck dishes from every corner of the world, music blending salsa with hip-hop with old jazz standards. Mr. Reyes led a circle of veterans in song, his voice steady despite the years. Marcus chased his toddler daughter through the crowd, her giggles infectious. Mia, home for break, demonstrated her latest prototype to a cluster of awestruck teens. And in the midst of it all, Alex felt something he once chased in boardrooms and balance sheets. Belonging, profound and unbreakable. Later, when the party wound down and snow fell thick and silent, Alex and Elena walked the garden paths alone. Fairy lights twinkled in the bare branches, turning the world into a quiet wonderland. He stopped beneath the old oak they'd fought to save from developers years ago, its roots now strong and deep. "I used to think success was a summit," he said, voice soft against the hush of snow. "Reach the top, plant your flag, survey everything you'd conquered. But it's not a mountain at all. It's an ocean, vast, unpredictable, alive. You don't conquer it. You learn to swim, to float, to carry others when storms come. And sometimes, if you're lucky beyond measure, you find people willing to swim beside you." Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "And sometimes," she whispered, "a single bus ride is enough to change the tide for thousands." In that moment, beneath the snow-laced sky, Alex understood the true magnitude of what had begun that ordinary morning. One act of frustration, boarding a crowded bus, had unraveled a life of isolation and rebuilt it into something radiant. Wealth had not vanished. It had transformed, flowing not into private excess but into shared possibility. Power had not diminished. It had multiplied, distributed among dreamers who now dared to believe they mattered. The ripples stretched farther than he could see. In Detroit, a laid-off auto worker used center-inspired tools to launch a co-op. In Nairobi, a young woman modeled her nonprofit on their blueprint. In boardrooms across the globe, Executives paused before signing deals, asking the question Alex now lived by. Who benefits and who is left behind? And on quiet nights, when the city slept, Alex would stand at his window, watching lights flicker in windows up and down the block. Each one a life, each one a story intersecting with his own. He no longer feared tomorrow's uncertainties. He welcomed them, knowing that true wealth was measured not in assets, but in the light you helped others kindle. Years later, when people asked how a billionaire became a bridge builder, Alex never started with the gala confession or the foundation's triumphs. He always began with the bus, the jolt of potholes, the scent of peppermint, the stranger who saw past his suit to the man searching beneath it. Because that was the miracle, not the money redirected, not the policies shifted, not even the lives touched directly. The miracle was that one ordinary ride, on one ordinary day, proved something extraordinary. That no one is ever too far gone to turn around, that redemption is not reserved for the flawless, and that the greatest empires are not built of steel and code, but of courage, connection, and the willingness to change direction when fate offers an unexpected seat. And somewhere, on a city bus winding through streets aglow with evening promise, another hurried soul might one day accept a peppermint from a kind-eyed stranger, glance up from their screen, and feel the first gentle tug toward a different path. The wheel turns, the ride continues, and the world, quietly, astonishingly, becomes a little brighter, one transformed heart at a time.